Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 6 important articles. Along with this, I'll be covering 2 important PIB articles as well to ensure that we have a comprehensive coverage of current affairs. The idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement. Unacademy will be conducting India's biggest Civil Services Championship Test, UCSC, this Sunday on the 12th of July. Those of you who participate in the scholarship test, you stand a chance to win attractive rewards to the tune of 40 crores. The first ranker would get a tablet, with the others receiving Amazon gift vouchers and scholarships to enroll into our subscription. So, this test will take place at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. You can take up either of the tests, and the date is 12th of July. So, those of you who are interested, please check out the link provided in the description below. And we're also conducting a free UCAN test series, a current affairs test series based on our UCAN classes, the Unacademy's Current Affairs Navigator. Under UCAN, we take up 15 current affairs classes for our paid students, for our plus, iconic, and platinum students. So, based on these UCAN classes, where we cover subject based current affairs, we provide weekly practice tests, and now we are making these tests free for a limited period of time. So, all students can attempt these current affairs tests along with getting a All India rank. So, you just have to scan the QR code on your screen to take up the free weekly current affairs test. With this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 8, there's an editorial on the topic of social media ban for minors. Across the world, we have seen few countries taking up these measures, these legislative and policy measures, to ban access to social media for minors who are under the age of 16 years, especially, in order to protect teenagers from the harmful effects of social media addiction. Australia became the first country in the world to bring out such a legal ban, which was enforced on social media companies. Today, we have many other countries considering a similar move, from Malaysia to France to UK. Many countries are also taking the same path. Even within India, we have states like Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, which are considering a similar proposal to ban social media for minors. Now, this topic is in the news because during Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Australia, PM Modi told his counterpart, Anthony Albanese, that India is learning from Australia's ban on social media, which is an indicator that probably India might also be considering a similar legislative move or a policy action to restrict social media access to minor children. It's in this context that we need to debate this topic, go a little deep into this important issue, and understand this from all different perspectives. Now, before we discuss, you might be wondering how come we have not covered PM Modi's visit to Indonesia, to Australia, and to New Zealand? These were 3 important high profile visits. The reason is I'm planning to do a separate video on this today. Now that the visit is coming to an end, we were waiting for all the 3 visits to be completed so that we have all the outcomes in place. So today evening, we will bring out a separate video, a dedicated video covering PM Modi's visit to 3 important countries in the Indo Pacific. Now, coming back to our discussion, first let's understand the ill effects of social media on mental health, especially that of teenagers and minor children. See, studies have established a correlation between increased anxiety, depression, social isolation, which could be triggered by social media abuse and social media addiction. In fact, increased sleeplessness, losing a sense of reality, what's real, what's not, getting addicted to doom scrolling, suffering from chronic depression, loneliness, and complete social isolation. These are some common traits that have often been found in various studies focusing on the ill effects of social media. So, indeed exists a direct correlation between mental health and social media usage. This is true for adults as well, and it's even more true for the younger population, for teenagers and minors. But however, there are critics who have a counter argument to this as well. See, when you look at social media platforms, you take Instagram, for example, or you take Facebook, you take any other popular platform, they all have an inherent built in design feature which is designed to create an addictive pattern. They are designed to deliver those repeated dopamine hits to trigger the happy centers of your brain. And this is a part of the UX, the user interface itself. And the very development of these platforms is based on cracking human psychology to develop that pattern of addiction. That's why when you scroll through these apps, you see that the videos play automatically. You don't have to click on a video, especially for reels and shorts, the short form content. You just have to scroll through and they keep playing endlessly. So this triggers the natural psychological pathways which could push you towards addiction, towards doom scrolling, where you're constantly hooked to these videos. And also look at how these algorithms learn from your patterns, your likes and dislikes, your behavior, and appropriately suggest the suitable content which can catch your attention. So the recommended videos which come, they grab your attention, they keep you hooked to the screen. These algorithms are designed to increase your screen presence, essentially to look more at the screen so that they can deliver more targeted advertisements. So the overall features of these apps and the way they are designed, the way they are built, the way the user interface is developed, it is all designed to deliver the dopamine hit, to push you towards doom scrolling. And naturally, there is that correlation that exists between social media abuse and mental health issues. But the problem does get aggravated with teenagers and minors. And that's why some experts believe that an outright ban on social media might be the right solution. They consider this to be the ideal solution to keep those who are under the age of 16 years away from social media through a legally enforceable ban, where the companies will be held accountable, where the companies have to create dedicated gateways to keep minors out and ensure that minors are not exposed to the harmful effects of social media. So, some psychologists, researchers, digital right activists, and child right activists, they all believe that this is the right way, this is the right approach, which is to ban social media for minors. But as I said, there is a counter argument to this as well. There are experts who believe that this could be counterproductive because current studies, they have not conclusively established this correlation. There might be other factors as well which could be contributing to anxiety, depression. Yes, when a person suffers from depression, loneliness, and social isolation, you tend to get addicted to something or the other. And social media provides that escape, it provides that gateway where the youth can channel their isolation and frustration and depression. But what if this is just a causal assumption? What if social media addiction is not the only reason? Maybe it's not the primary reason which is driving loneliness and depression, right? Then a ban may not be the right solution. In fact, it will have a counterproductive effect. Because, see, social media does have its pros along with its cons, it does have its advantages along with disadvantages. So, when the science and the study about this is not very clear, when there is no direct causal link which has been established, pushing for an outright ban and trying to enforce it, it might be the easiest solution. It might look to be the most effective and attractive solution to implement because the problem is too complex to solve. And this is generally how human mindset works. Whenever we face a massive societal problem, right, we look for or we crave for easy solutions, solutions which seem to be correct, which seem to be the ideal path. And banning social media is that option for most governments because this is an easy way out to deal with a complex problem, which is the mental health of the youth. and how to keep them away from social media addiction, how to reduce their screen time. This is a much bigger challenge to be addressed. So, when you look at the pros and cons of social media, especially for minor children, for teenagers, adolescents, social media is empowering as well. See, today's generation is much better aware. They have much better knowledge, awareness, information about almost everything. And a large part of the credit goes to the internet and goes to social media platforms. You can't deny that. You can't deny the fact that today the youth is more aware than previous generations. And much of the credit goes to social media platforms for creating that exposure, creating that platform, that awareness. It helps teenagers, minors to connect with their peers, with like minded minors, especially if they are suffering from health issues or disabilities, or let's say they're getting bullied at school. This helps create a peer group, a support group of sorts, which actually helps in their growth and development. Something which they can't share with their own family or with their own friends. They might do it more willingly on social media platforms. So you can't take away that emotional attachment that minors might have, where it could be actually having a positive impact by creating a group of peers where they can share, where they can communicate and build a different social network. So there are definitely some advantages of social media, but of course, there are equally serious disadvantages and risk factors as well. For example, teenagers could become victims of cyberbullying. They might get lured into illicit activities. They might get pushed into grooming by pedophiles towards child pornography as well. There is a possibility that it drives procrastination. It could affect their actual social skills in the physical world. It could affect their interpersonal communication and skills, leading to further isolation, and that could push a youth towards depression, anxiety, loneliness, significantly impacting their mental health. So there are equally serious concerns, drawbacks, disadvantages. At the same time, there are few pros and advantages as well. So keeping this in mind, it's important to understand that the solution may not be as simple as imposing just one ban through a law, through a policy, something which can be enforced with penalties. Instead, the editorial has a different take on this. The editorial is arguing that instead of an outright ban, which may not yield the required results, we need to consider a host of steps and measures to address this problem. Because see, studies in Australia have shown that despite the ban, it has been in effect for more than 1 year right now. Despite the ban on social media for 16 years and below, 85% of minors in Australia are still continuing to access social media. This is the ground reality. A new research has shown that even though it has been nearly 1.5 to 2 years since Australia brought out this ban on social media for minors, 85% minors are still having access to it. Though the companies and the firms have designed age based barriers, it is quite easy to bypass them, right? Through VPN networks or by their parents' accounts, right? So there are many different ways through which minors can easily access social media despite a ban being placed. The study shows in Australia that 85% minors are still having access to it. So then what's the point of the ban? Right? This might even become counterproductive. So instead, it would be better to moderate the content, to introduce digital literacy in schools, to educate a child on how to access, how to use social media, how to develop a healthy social media behavior, how to stay away from addiction, from doom scrolling, and use it for its benefits. So, this requires digital literacy being introduced as part of school education, starting from a very young age. This requires restricting the addictive design features, where you need to place restrictions and regulations on social media firms to push them to alter their user interface design, their algorithmic design. In fact, in today's newspaper, there is a related article. The European Union is pushing social media companies to end certain features, such as video autoplay. and recommended content for minors. So any habit which can induce the addictive traits, they are being restricted by the European Union. And the EU is very serious about imposing these restrictions on the social media companies. So making such changes in the user interface, in the design of the application, in the algorithmic design as well, could protect children from harmful content. It would keep them away from addictive content. Moderating this content, ensuring the content is safe, is the responsibility of the social media companies. Providing for more effective parental controls, where the parents have a high degree of control to ensure the privacy of their child on social media, is very important. And this is where social media companies have a bigger responsibility. That's why the editorial is arguing for better regulation of these platforms, placing more restrictions on these platforms instead of banning the platforms outright. But however, there is an equally strong counterpoint. There are experts who believe that we should not do the same mistake with social media as we did with tobacco. Few decades ago, there was initial evidence available that tobacco addiction is particularly high amongst youth, amongst teenagers as well. But governments were slow to act. Experts said we don't have enough evidence to directly connect tobacco addiction with the addiction that youth were developing. So the delay led to widespread tobacco consumption, which today has become a serious health problem across countries. So some experts are saying that we should not wait until we have 100% proof and evidence. Maybe you will never get that perfect evidence. But at least the current research shows a causal link between social media addiction and mental health issues amongst teenagers. So those experts believe this is the right time to act, and banning minors from social media is the right way to do it. But others argue that a ban may not be effective. It may be counterproductive as well. Instead, these steps where social media companies are regulated, where these companies are pushed to change their user interface, their algorithmic design, to take away those addictive features and ensure that the platform is designed to promote a healthy environment, and introducing digital literacy in schools, giving greater control for parents over the accounts of their children. These measures can be more effective, according to the other experts. So, definitely, the opinion here is divided. So, this topic becomes all the more relevant given that Prime Minister Modi has appreciated Australia's model and said that we are learning from Australia, which means there is an indication coming from the highest level of the leadership that India might also be considering some form of regulation in the coming days to protect minors from the harmful effects of social media. That's why this debate can be very important for the exams. So, is banning social media the right approach, or should we better regulate it? What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and please take up this mains question for your answer writing practice. Now, let's move to the next article on page number 8. We have a very insightful column written by Dr. Shashi Tharoor. In this column, Dr. Shashi Tharoor is focusing on the topic of global terrorism. The topic can be very relevant for security under GS paper 3, can be relevant for international relations as well under GS paper 2. So Dr. Shashi Tharoor is talking about recent data with regard to global terrorism, data from United Nations and other global bodies which keep a watch on the trends in terrorism. These data pointers, they indicate that the number of deaths and the number of attacks linked with terrorism has seen a significant decline across the world. Almost 81 countries are reporting an improved security situation internally and externally. They are in a better position to deal with security threats emerging from or emanating from terrorist organizations. And overall, at the global level, the number of terror related deaths and terror attacks have seen a significant decline. So, this data shows that probably the world is finally turning the tide against terrorism and finding an effective way to fight and even probably someday defeat terrorism. But Dr. Shashi Tharoor has a big warning. The data could be misleading. When you take aggregate data at the global level, everything looks fantastic because the deaths related to terrorism has dropped by 28%. This was for 2025. Number of terror attacks have declined by around 22%. So definitely this is a significant improvement. But however, according to the writer, this data could be misleading because today, if you understand the global spread of terrorism, if you understand which regions, which countries are affected, what factors are driving the terrorist and non-state organizations, then have a better understanding of what's really happening in the world of terrorism. Has it really declined? Has the threat really gone down? Because see, such data could be misleading. It could lead to complacency amongst experts, governments, intelligence agencies, and law enforcement agencies. When consistent data keeps emerging that number of terror deaths and terror attacks are going down, this could automatically drive complacency within the government, within security forces, intelligence agencies, and law enforcement agencies. That's why Shashi Tharoor is warning against this. That to understand this trend, to understand the data, you need to actually look at what's happening in the world of terrorism. Aggregate data looks great. At the global level, yes, the data is right. But there is some unevenness within this data. There are certain regions, specific countries where terrorism is more concentrated today. And if this threat is not addressed, tomorrow terrorism will revive, it will carry out a resurgence, it will adapt very quickly. And that is a key lesson that we get to take away from this article. Now, according to Dr. Shashi Tharoor, there are 5 countries in the world which have currently become the terror hubs. Almost 70% of all the terror attacks that are happening in the world today, they are taking place in these 5 countries. And which are these 5 countries? As you can guess, our dear neighbor Pakistan is right at the top with repeated attacks by Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or TTP and the presence of multiple Pakistan sponsored terrorist groups, including Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and the others. So Pakistan remains right at the top. But second comes Africa, especially western parts of Africa, some parts of Eastern Africa, and Central Africa as well. These regions in Africa have been very, very badly affected by terrorism. Sub Saharan Africa today has emerged as the global hub of terror. Though Afghanistan Pakistan belt was generally considered as the hub of global terrorism, today African region, especially West African countries, some East African countries, even some parts of Central Africa, are registering a major surge in terrorist activities. So Africa has become the new hub, and 70% of the attacks occurring are concentrated here in Pakistan and in few African countries. For example, in West African countries such as Burkina Faso, then Niger, then we also have countries like Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo. These 4 African nations are the most affected. In Nigeria, you have a notorious terrorist outfit known as Boko Haram, which was previously affiliated with Al Qaeda, and later it shifted allegiance towards Islamic State. And of late, it is operating independently. It's infamous for targeting women, for targeting school going girls, and for targeting religious minorities in Nigeria. Then in Burkina Faso, Niger, and also in Mali and Mauritania, there are multiple terror organizations, especially the JNIM, affiliated with Al Qaeda and different branches of Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb. They envision an Islamic Maghreb across the African Sahel. This is the African Sahel region that stretches from the Atlantic towards the Red Sea, covering this part of West Africa, parts of Northern Africa, closer towards the Horn of Africa region. Across the entire African Sahel, there are multiple terrorist organizations operating. These countries have gone through a lot of internal conflict. They have seen military coups. Countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, they have all come under military dictatorship. There has been a lot of internal conflict with external involvement. So the presence of all these factors have made a fertile ground in the Sahel region for terrorist groups and non-state actors to thrive and flourish. In Democratic Republic of Congo, where an active civil war has been going on between various armed groups, and a covert war takes place as well here between DRC and Rwanda. There is external involvement of Russia and Western powers as well. So this conflict in DRC has also spiraled out of control, and there are regular terror attacks taking place in this region. When you come to East Africa, you have Somalia and the Kenya region, which is mainly dominated by a terrorist group called Al Shabaab. Al Shabaab, which mainly controls almost half of Somalia, also has links with Somalian piracy, has been affiliated with Al Qaeda, has been posing a threat across Eastern Africa and Indian Ocean region from a very long time, from at least 3 4 decades. Even in parts of Mozambique, the ISIS has created a presence for itself in countries like Tanzania as well. So across Eastern Africa, also you find a hub for terror activities, radicalism. So these regions in Africa, from West Africa to East Africa, they have become the new hotspots with large scale attacks taking place. The civil war in Sudan and South Sudan also contributes to this. The developments in Libya, in Algeria, the lack of strong governments, the lack of good administration, the vacuum in policing and intelligence has created a fertile ground for radical terrorist groups and extremists to thrive and flourish. And most of the attacks are today concentrated in this belt. That's why Dr. Shashi Tharoor is warning the world against complacency, because the data at the aggregate level, at the global level, shows a different picture altogether. It shows that terrorism is completely declining. Number of attacks are going down, the number of deaths related to terrorism are going down. But when you look at the granular data, when you break it up region wise, country wise, there is a clear unevenness which becomes evident. It is all concentrated in few parts of the world, in Pakistan, in few parts of West Asia, in many parts of Africa. Now, if this issue is not addressed right now with global coordination, this will fester. The terror groups are very smart, they adapt very quickly, they can be very resilient as well. And tomorrow, they will spread their tentacles. They will make a revival and come back to affect every other part of the world. So, that is one key lesson that you take away from this article, right? The studies have shown that most of the terrorist prevalence which is there today, it is all concentrated in conflict torn countries. Because in a country where an active conflict is going on, let's say two nations are fighting against each other for many, many years, or let's say there's an internal civil war going on. So, such conflict situations that would have weakened the state, weakened the administration, the state capacity would have been hollowed out. The police, the security forces, intelligence agencies, their ability to maintain that degree of dominance would have reduced. And as the state's role declines, as development gets compromised, security gets compromised, it creates a fertile ground for radical elements to thrive and flourish. So there is always a direct linkage between development and extremism, which is an important lesson for security. When development suffers, when the state's presence is weakened because of internal conflict, it always creates a fertile ground to drive extremism. And non-state actors, they capitalize on this. They fill the vacuum that is left behind by state actors, and they will try to project their dominance in the region and even create local support, which becomes pivotal for their operations. And another important trend which is being noticed is that today terrorist activity is largely concentrated in border areas, in frontier regions. It's not mainly found in the hinterland or in the interior parts of a country. Terrorism is largely concentrated in and around international borders, particularly within 100 kilometers of international borders, especially if they are disputed or if there is an active conflict going on. Take, for example, the India Pakistan border. Pakistan's state sponsorship of terrorism, right, is mainly concentrated in and around the border areas, or the terror threat that emanates from neighboring countries like Myanmar, Bangladesh, where insurgent terror groups have found safe sanctuaries. It's all mainly concentrated in the border regions, in the frontier areas. And this has to be a focus, a priority for governments when they deal with terrorism. The cross border factors, they play a very big role. It makes it easy for terrorist groups to find sanctuaries in the other country or in the conflict hit areas, in the disputed border regions. They can easily arrange their logistics, move arms and weapons. They can engage in organized crime like drug trafficking, arms trafficking, to raise funds for their operations. So, border areas are ideal, are perfect settings for terrorist groups to thrive and flourish. And especially if the region is witnessing a conflict or if that country is going through an internal conflict, it's a perfect setting for terrorist groups to thrive. So, global efforts are required, coordinated efforts from all major powers without any complacency. Maybe US, European countries are not affected by terrorism to the same extent as they were before. So, it doesn't mean they should get complacent. So, it requires a coordinated global effort to help the state actors in Africa and in South Asia and West Asia. They require global support and assistance to weaken and defeat the threat of terrorism. Plus, we have the online factor, where online radicalization has been playing a big role in creating lone wolf terrorists or lone wolf actors, especially with the emergence of Islamic State and its effective utilization of online platforms. How ISIS has used encrypted applications like Telegram and various other encrypted darknet based chat rooms to promote its propaganda, to create decentralized terror modules across the world, and even inspire individual radicalized youth on the internet to take up individual acts of terrorism, which is much harder to detect and disrupt. Many such lone wolf attacks have taken place in Europe, in Australia, and in other parts of the world, from stabbings in United Kingdom to using a truck to drive it into a crowd in countries like France. Such lone wolf attacks have become quite prevalent across European countries. In Australia as well, we have seen such incidents. So, this raises the new challenge where you require global coordination to tackle the threat of online radicalization, and it requires global sharing of intelligence between friendly partners to defeat the threat of terrorism. So, terrorism is far from over, it's far from defeated. The trend is a good sign, definitely. The aggregate data does show some positive decline in terrorism. There is a significant drop in the numbers, but however, the threat remains very active and concentrated in certain hubs. So, if the world becomes complacent about the threat, if the world loses the focus, if they allow all the remaining terror groups to thrive and flourish in these hotspots, then tomorrow you will see that the terror groups will revive. They're resilient, they adapt quickly, and they might spread their tentacles far and beyond. So, that is why the writer is arguing for global cooperation to fight terrorism. So please take up this mains question for your answer writing practice. Now let's move on to another important article. There's an editorial on page number 8 that focuses on women in higher education in India. An important topic for social justice and social issues. Recently, the All India Survey on Higher Education, the survey data was published, and there are some positive signs with regard to enrollment of women in higher education in the country. In fact, according to the Aishe report, over the last decade, in the last 10 years from 2014 to 2024, there is a 42% increase in female enrollment ratio. A 42% increase in female enrollment in higher education. So, in Indian colleges, universities, within a span of 10 years, a massive jump has been noticed. In just a decade, female enrollment has jumped by 42%, and this is not a ordinary achievement. It's a very significant milestone as far as women empowerment is concerned and tackling the gender gap is concerned. This achieves gender parity in higher education. In fact, the gender parity index in India's higher education now stands at 1.08. What does it mean? It means for every 100 men who enroll into higher education in the country, there are 108 women enrolling into higher education. Women have overtaken men, and currently the total ratio of women in higher education stands at 49.7%, which is close to 50%, which means India is very well on the path to achieve gender parity with regard to higher education. The gender parity index stands at a very healthy 1.08. So the numbers look fantastic, right? Even in absolute terms, in 2014, India had around 1.57 crore women in higher education. This has increased to around 2.24 crore women by 2024-2025, which is a massive jump, right? But however, though the trend is positive, there are still some concerns which remain. Now, though women are increasingly enrolled in colleges and universities, when you look at the labor market, when you look at female labor participation rate, the numbers are completely the opposite. So, what's happening if women are joining colleges, getting their degrees, getting their masters, getting their doctorates? How come you don't find the same number of women in employment, in the labor force, in the labor market? Why is this big mismatch coming up? So, that is a serious concern which this editorial is trying to address. Now, when you look at the All India survey on higher education, it not only gives us this positive data about increased women enrollment in higher education, it also has some very positive signs about the disadvantaged sections in the society, like women from scheduled caste, scheduled tribes. Their enrollment also has jumped significantly in the last decade. The number of female SC students in higher education has jumped by 51.4%. The number of women ST students has jumped by 75%. These are definitely positive indicators, but it is not translating into jobs. It's not resulting in more women entering our labor market. And that is the core issue which has to be addressed, the gender gap which has to be tackled. Now, when you look at the higher education domain, particularly the STEM domain, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, women are mainly concentrated in the S category. S is for sciences. That's your basic sciences like chemistry, biology, zoology, botany, physics, etc. So, in the science domain, women have a majority. 54.6 candidates in the science domain are women. But when you look at technology and engineering, this remains a male dominated industry. The technology and engineering domain is largely dominated by male with only 31.1% women students. Now, this mismatch will reflect in the coming years and decades as the world moves towards artificial intelligence. If there are more men in engineering, in technology, in software engineering, it means that women's representation in critical emerging technologies will also decline. And that is quite alarming because this will perpetuate the gender gap in critical emerging technologies as well. While it is a good sign that we have more women in sciences, the far fewer women in technology and engineering is a serious concern. The number of women opting for technology and engineering is considerably lower. This has a lot to do with patriarchy in our society. It has a lot to do with the social expectation on women who are expected to marry, move into their husband's household, take care of the family, have a child, rear the child, take care of the child. This patriarchal nature of our society, which imposes this burden and responsibility on women, is largely responsible for this mismatch because women are discouraged from taking up a full time employment. If they're already employed in a paid, gainful employment, which matches with their degree, they're often discouraged to go to work once they have a child. They're expected to stay at home, look after the kid and the family, and the husband completely escapes this responsibility. So this has a big role to play. When women come back into labor force, let's say after a few years after childbirth, they may not find adequate opportunities. They may not find a job which matches their skill, their talent, their expertise. They will settle for a lower pay, or they might move into a completely different domain. Maybe a woman candidate might be a leading software engineer, but after marriage, after childbirth, following all the break, when she comes back to the workforce, maybe she'll not get employment in the IT industry. She will settle for a low paying job in some other industry. So this results in a big mismatch. So when you look at the periodic labor force survey report, and if you look at the female labor force participation rate, this trend becomes very, very clear and evident, right? In the labor force, there is a clear male domination with a significant reduction in the participation of women in the labor force. Even within the education industry, if you look at just the higher education industry, the patriarchy is very evident within the higher education sector. Look at your colleges and universities. You will definitely have more male teachers than female teachers. According to the Aishe data, for every 82 female teachers, there are 100 male teachers. That's the ratio, right? For every 100 male teachers, you have just 82 female teachers. And if you look at leadership positions in your colleges and universities, women are barely represented. Very few women manage to rise up in leadership roles in educational institutions. So within colleges and universities, there is a clear mismatch, a clear gender gap, which is evident. So this translates into the labor market as well. The social burden on women, the patriarchal expectations, they all play a big role. And it discourages women from entering the labor force. And this is the next big problem for India to solve. We need to ensure that women with higher education enter the labor market, get a paid employment, and the employment should match their degree. It should be commensurate with the work that they are doing, with the skills they have, with the degree that they have got. So ensuring this is the next big challenge with regard to women related issues in the country and gender gap related issues in the country. Now, coming to the prelim section, we have three small articles which are relevant for the exam. Let's take a quick look, and then we will look at two PIB press releases as well. On the front page, there's an article that refers to election petition. You need to understand what is an election petition. Tamil Nadu recently went through assembly elections, and in 5 constituencies, election commission was looking to hold bypolls. But in these constituencies, election petitions had already been filed at the Madras High Court. So based on the grounds that election petitions are being heard by the High Court, a stay order has been issued for holding the bypolls. Because when the election results were challenged and when the court is still looking into the matter, how can bypolls be held? If bypolls are held, what if there are two candidates then? What if, let's say, the election petition stands and you basically have two winners, one from the bypoll election, one from the initial assembly election, and that creates an anomaly. So the High Court has halted the bypolls in these assembly constituencies as it is currently hearing a bunch of election petitions. So what is an election petition? See, election petition allows someone to challenge the results of an election in a constituency, be it a parliamentary constituency or an assembly constituency or even a local election. These elections can be challenged where you can inquire into the election results. If you believe there was a corrupt practice involved, if you believe that the results were not accurate, if there is some prima facie evidence to indicate that, as per the provisions of Representation of People Act, election petitions are entertained by the respective high courts in that particular jurisdiction. So high courts have original jurisdiction here. You can't take up election petition at lower session courts and district courts. You can't take it up directly at the Supreme Court. High courts exercise original jurisdiction in whichever state the elections were held. In that particular jurisdiction, the concerned high court will take up the election petitions. Now, these petitions will have to be filed within a period of 45 days from the declaration of results. The provisions are contained under RPA, and it suggests that High Court should resolve these petitions within a period of 6 months. But generally, these cases they drag for several months, even sometimes a few years. But yes, it does disrupt the electoral cycle for that constituency. Now, on what grounds can this petition be filed? Of course, it can't be on frivolous grounds, right? Disrupting an electoral process cannot be on frivolous grounds. There are certain specific provisions on specific grounds on which this petition can be moved. Section 100 of Representation of People Act allows someone to challenge the winning candidate who was not qualified to contest the election in the first place. Let's say election results have been declared, but later it is it is in the public domain that the candidate who won the election was never eligible to contest the election in the first place. So if such grounds are available, if it can be established, then on these grounds the election results can be challenged. And if a corrupt practice was used by the winning candidate or by their polling agent, their party members, etc., like offering a bribe or using hate speech, dividing people, dividing voters on the lines of religion, caste, ethnicity, etc., to garner votes. If such corrupt practices are used, if voters were threatened, forced, and coerced to vote for a candidate, if this can be established, this can also be a ground under Section 123 of RPA. Then, any improper acceptance of nomination, when nominations are filed before the returning officer, if there were any mistakes that were made, and if it can be established, then the election results can be nullified. Any malpractice in the counting process. In the counting process, if the petitioner can clearly point out some of the malpractices with evidence, then yes, the election can be nullified and it can be reheld. And also, non compliance with the other provisions of the Constitution and the Representation of People Act. On these serious grounds, election petition can be filed to challenge the election results, and high courts will have the original jurisdiction. So they can even overturn the electoral verdict and call for a re-election as well. Next, four important conservation projects have been approved for four important species. For the river dolphin, a new conservation and recovery action plan has been approved. Then Project Snow Leopard, the second phase, has also been approved, which also includes a all India survey or a estimate, a census to estimate the population of the snow leopard in the country. Then the conservation project focused on the Indian rhinoceros, the one-horned great or the greater rhinoceros, and a conservation project for protecting the wild water buffalo. These four conservation projects have been approved by the governing body of the CAMPA. What is the CAMPA? CAMPA is the Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority. It's a key body in the field of environment conservation to counter deforestation, to protect ecosystems, and to ensure that development has a minimal impact on the environment. So, learning about CAMPA can be very important. We will take a look at what is CAMPA. But first, can you find out the IUCN status of the four species that are mentioned here? What is the IUCN status on the red list of river dolphins, of the snow leopard, the Indian rhinoceros, and wild water buffalo? That's a small homework for you, small exercise. Please find out their IUCN status. Mention that in the comment section below. Now, coming to CAMPA, the Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority. This was initially set up under the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. Because, see, any development project where forest land is being diverted for non forest purposes will result in deforestation. It will affect the ecosystem and the biodiversity. So, to counter the effect, CAMPA was set up where funds would be deposited by the developer, by the project uh, proponent, which will be used for afforestation measures to protect and restore forest cover, which will be invested in conservation of wildlife and biodiversity. So, this institutional setup was created under the Forest Conservation Act. The funds are administered by this Management and Planning Authority called CAMPA. Now, there is a dedicated law passed in 2016 that provides statutory status to CAMPA. The Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act 2016. It has streamlined the functioning of this authority, which manages the funds that are assigned for afforestation and environment conservation purposes. When forest land is diverted for non forest purposes, the project proponent is supposed to pay for the damage, deposit the funds, which in turn is used for afforestation measures and environment conservation efforts. So, the governing body of CAMPA has approved these projects where they will provide funding for these ongoing four conservation projects focused on these four important species. So, now find out the IUCN status of the four species and mention that in the comment section below. Coming to the last article for today, all the South Indian states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh, and as well as the Union Territory of Puducherry, they have all come together to set up the first ever permanent interstate coordination mechanism to deal with drug trafficking, to lead their anti drug operations. See, the Kerala State Police has been conducting a high profile anti drug operation, which is code named as Operation Toofan. Operation Toofan is an ongoing anti drug operation led by the Kerala Police. Under Operation Toofan, Kerala Police are cracking down on the drug cultivation regions in Western Ghats. They're cracking down on the drug trafficking routes within the state of Kerala. They are also focusing on the maritime routes in the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean from where drugs are pumped into Kerala. So it's an ongoing massive anti-drug drive in Kerala led by Kerala Police. So now government of Kerala is partnering with the other South Indian states and union territories. They're all coming together to set up a permanent interstate coordination mechanism where the state police forces will have a permanent platform to share intelligence with each other with regard to their anti narcotics drive. It will also have representation from central agencies. For example, it will have representation from Narcotics Control Bureau, it will have representation from Intelligence Bureau, and as well as from Indian Customs, because seaports and airports are often used to smuggle and traffic drugs into the country. So, central agencies like NCB, IB, and Customs will also have a representative as part of this permanent interstate coordination mechanism. This will provide for seamless center state coordination as well and interstate coordination amongst the southern states to fight against the menace of drug trafficking. So, please make a note of this. Now, coming to the PIB press releases, the Defense Ministry had an important press release. According to this press release, INS Mahendragiri is all set to be inducted into the Indian Navy. It's a stealth frigate built under Project 17A. Project 17A warships are advanced stealth frigates that were designed in house by the Indian Navy, by the Navy's Warship Design Bureau, and the ships are built indigenously by Mazgaon Dock Limited in Mumbai. These vessels under Project 17A, they nearly have 75% indigenous content, which is a big boost for Atmanirbhar Bharat and aligns with the Make in India initiative, right? So under Project 17A, advanced stealth frigates are being designed, built, and inducted with a lot of indigenous content, indigenous technology, and these are mission-ready platforms. They come with advanced sensors and advanced radars with massive firepower. So Mahendragiri is being inducted into the Eastern Fleet, which will significantly enhance India's firepower in the Bay of Bengal region. Next, Financial Intelligence Unit India has won the best Egmont Case Award at the Egmont Group Plenary held in Baku in Azerbaijan. This is a press release from the Ministry of Finance. See, FIU India is one of the elite financial intelligence units in the country. It functions under Finance Ministry. It reports to the Economic Intelligence Council, which is chaired by the Finance Minister. So it was set up in 2004. The FIU India was set up in 2004 to help combat money laundering and terror financing. Also, this helped India to fulfill its obligations under the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, because FATF has mandated that every country should not only have a national law, a national legislation that bans money laundering, which India has done through the PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And you should also have a national legislation for terror financing, which India does through UAPA under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, where India tackles terror financing. FATF mandates these national legislations and it recommends that there should be two institutions to combat money laundering. There should be one law enforcement agency, a Directorate of Enforcement, which India already has in the form of ED, the Enforcement Directorate, and a financial intelligence unit to keep a check on suspicious financial activity, to monitor the transactions happening in the financial system on the back end, to raise red flags regarding any suspicious financial transactions where money laundering, terror financing might be involved, where proceeds of illegal criminal activity is being moved through the financial system. Tracking them and disrupting such financial movements is the task of Financial Intelligence Unit India. So all the financial intelligence units of the world from all the countries, they meet regularly at the Egmont Group Plenary. So this can also be asked, what is the Egmont Group Plenary? It essentially is an annual conclave that brings the FIUs of all various countries from across the world. Every country would have its own version of FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit. So FIU India has won the Becca Award, the Best Egmont Case Award, for cracking down on a large-scale cyber scam where the proceeds of the cyber scam was being moved through mule accounts and crypto transactions. So this case was successfully cracked by FIU India, and this has been awarded the Best Egmont Case Award for 2026. So please note, FIU India functions under Finance Ministry. It's a security agency focusing on the financial integrity of the nation. It monitors the financial transactions in the country. It works closely with ED and other intelligence and law enforcement agencies. It reports to the Economic Intelligence Council headed by the Finance Minister. So on this note, I bring the analysis to an end. If you found the session to be interesting and useful, do let us know through your comments, through your likes, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.